Good morning, everybody. We are happy to have you all here for the September session of the Catalogers Training Session. Um, as usual, we will have people monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there. If they are relevant to what's going on, we can interrupt the presenter and ask those questions, or depending on what it is, we may hold until the end. I do have the share update this morning. Just so everyone knows, some share staff are attending the ARSL conference in Chattanooga this week. So you might notice a bit of a delay in responses or requests if you are talking to various staff members, but they will get back to you as soon as they can. We also have several openings for share committee volunteer opportunities, and these will be posted in the upcoming share newsletter, hopefully coming out this week or next. So if you have any questions about those, feel free to contact more than likely Cassandra Thompson. Okay. And so now we will move on to the Bibliographic and Cataloging Standards Committee update.
Hi, this is Linda. I'm a cataloger at the Carbondale office, and in our July meeting, they spoke about the Kit and Caboodle program. The Kit and Caboodle program continues, but they're no longer using the reservation system. You can now request through Polaris like you would request any other hold. You just can't place a reservation like through the reservation system. It just wasn't syncing well with Polaris, so we made the switch. There was an addition to our local subject headings. This was for the ability to identify local authors. It's now optional. You can use the 690 subfield A for local author's name and the subfield Z for the geographic location of where the author is from. Cassandra also spoke about, there were some questions about language translation of PAC, and she did do a cost analysis of that along with our financial people and found that it is cost prohibitive. But if individual libraries find that they have a need for that, you can discuss that with Cher and Cassandra. There were also discussions that went on about periodic refresher courses for barcoders, the PAL format of DVDs being cataloged, and author versus adapter for the main entry for manga, and those all were tabled for another time when more information could be gathered. A reminder that our next meeting is Friday, October 14th at 10 a.m. All are welcome to attend as visitors, and you can register in L2. I'm going to go ahead with the miscellaneous. We might be a little bit out of order here because Jennifer is going to catch up on some of those. Also want to remind you about the Ask QC office hours. Those are a great way to stay up to date on the most recent cataloging information, and they do count towards your CE hours. I'll be placing a link to that in chat shortly. A reminder for catalogers to use the GMDs, that is your general material designation in the 245. Share policy is to use that for all records for Braille, large print material, larger print material, and all non-print formats. The list of GMD terms can be found on Share's website under cataloging, policy and procedures, use of general material designation. And I'm going to pass it on to Jennifer now.
Thank you, Linda. So a CE hours update. Thank you to everyone who got their CE hours completed and turned in for fiscal year 21 through 22. As usual, if you have any questions about your CE hours, feel free to email me at any time. And also, please feel free to reach out to me if you are unsure if something will qualify for CE. I'm more than happy to take a look at it and let you know what we can do with it. If you have any questions about last year's CE, please also email me and we can address that. The other thing that I have to mention is the official RDA toolkit. Once again, the Program for Cooperative Cataloging Policy Committee has decided that the PCC will not implement the official RDA toolkit before June of next year. And then they're planning on it being a rolling start. So as things come together and they actually have it ready for distribution to libraries with instructions that make sense, we'll talk at the committee level here, share if and when we will start that implementation process. But for now, it is nothing that we have to worry about. Okay, so I will turn it over to Pam for the CMC update.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we have all of our online with the CMCs in L2. They start in August and run through next May. Our next one is in October, putting that one in the chat. It's called Getting to Know You, Special Collections in Your Library. And Barb Scobie will be presenting that. We also have our Moodle classes. They are also in L2. We've got cataloging basics starting later this month, but it's full. So we created a spring session. And that's just going to kind of start you off at the basic level of learning how to catalog. And Eric and I will be co-presenting at ILA. If anybody is attending, please come see us and visit us at our booth, and you can get some free CMC swag.
Okay, and thank you, Pam. And now we will turn it over to Anna for our presentation today on cataloging video games.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen, and then Linda's going to start us off. Let me see here. All right. Can everybody see that okay?
And Anna, would you mind speaking up just a little bit, please?
Oh, yes, I can,
Thank you.
of course. Okay. No, thank you. Okay. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you for coming to our session today. And we are going to talk about video games. And this is a presentation that was adapted from an older presentation about video games that Edie, Elliot, and Shelley made. So Sue, one of our catalogers, did a lot of work to adapt it. So thank you to Sue. And now we will start off with Linda. Maybe.
I'm ready to go when you are.
Slide. Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right. Good morning. I'm going to start off with the descriptive elements first. The descriptive elements are very familiar to all of us from all the other formats that we catalog. They just are found in a different place. I know that video games can be a little intimidating, especially with all the different formats. And if you're not a gamer, like I'm not, the last game I played was probably Dr. Mario. So it can be intimidating. So the descriptive elements are title, statement of responsibility, edition information if it's present, publication information, series statement when present, and then identifiers such as IP, ISBN, or UPC numbers. Next slide, please. For the preferred source of information would be the title screen or title screens or title frame. Now, if you don't have, say it's an Xbox game and you don't have an Xbox player, it's perfectly fine to use the disc label or the container or accompanying material, or even an outside source. Or if you do have that player, you can use the title screen or an internal source such as the disc menu. If the title screen or frame has no title that applies to the resource as a whole, that's when you would choose one of those other sources. Next slide, please. The title proper is the title minus any subtitle or other title information. It's normally from, once again, from the title screen, and you always give a note to tell the source of title, even when you do take it from the preferred source. And you now put that note in a 588 first indicator 0 field instead of just a 500 note. And you do use brackets for information that's taken from outside of the resource, for example, a web page or publisher's description. Next slide, please. When you're original cataloging, you transcribe title from preferred source, add variant title for container title only if it is significantly different than the title on the screen. If it's a compilation and there's multiple discs with individual titles, use the collective title from the container if present. If there's not a collective title, record the first title in subfield A and all the others in subfield B. When you're copy cataloging, if the 245 title is taken from container and it matches your item, leave as it is. And once again, add that source of title note 588 first indicator 0 if it's not already present. Next slide, please. Reminder, once again, use that general material designation, the GMD. This was used in AACR records and has been removed from records in the OCLC, and it's not used in RDA. So we don't put it in the OCLC records, but we do put it into records that we import into Polaris. We put it in a subfield H, and the subfield H comes after subfields A, N, and P, but it comes before a subfield B. So you'll see here our example. Next slide, please. The subtitle is information used to qualify a title. It's usually in smaller font and not as prominent as the title proper. And that is put in a subfield B. A parallel title is the title proper in another language. And equal sign subfield B, parallel title. And when you have that collection where there's no collective title, you put the first title in a subfield A, semicolon, subfield B, second title, and then semicolon, third title. Next slide, please. So our video game, when you look at the title screens, you will see Bungie and Destiny 2. And Destiny 2 is the title. Next slide, please. And this is our disc label, Destiny 2 and Bungie. And then the container front, next slide, and the container back. So our video game in the OCLC record, 245 first and second indicators of 0, Destiny 2, and with our share local edit of adding the subfield H electronic resource. Next slide. It is rare for games to have a statement of responsibility. If it is, it's usually a game developer or designer. OLAC's best practices for cataloging video games, their recommendation is to only record a clear statement of responsibility in the 245 subfield C, not simply a corporate name with no function indicated, especially if only represented by a logo. So our example here where you would see it's developed by Gorilla. When you take that statement of responsibility, you transcribe exactly from the source. It may come from any source on the resource itself. The preferred source is the same as the title proper. If there are multiple statements of responsibility, the first is required and then the others can go in a 500 note. If the source is from outside, put it in brackets. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Variant titles are variations of the title proper, and that's used to spell out symbols or numbers, record a portion of the title or part of the title, or correct misspelled words. This is where, as a cataloger, you have to think how the patron might search for the title. You can also, the variant title can also be the title of the resource from other than the preferred source, such as the container or the spine of the container.
Linda,
is-
may I? I'm
Sure.
sorry. Go ahead and finish your sentence.
I was just going to say it's not the titles of the contents.
Okay. We did get a question come in. So if it pops up when you're playing the game or on the case, it's just a logo, then it doesn't matter. But if it's in writing, then you can transcribe it.
According to what OLAC's best practices is that unless it is written as developed by or designed by, where you can specifically specify a person or say an organization that has developed it, then you do not record it as the in the statement of responsibility. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right, next slide, please. So for our video game, you can see the OCLC record, the 246, first indicator 3, second indicator blank, Destiny 2, and that would stay the same in our share. Next slide, please. The addition statement, you can take it from anywhere on the source. Once again, it's preferred if it comes from the same source as the title proper. If it's taken from an outside resource, such as a website, put it in brackets. And transcribe exactly from the source, including capitalization and abbreviations. And you can see our examples here. And you won't see these on every video game. Next slide. Also, with addition statements for video games, you record the platform as an addition statement to distinguish it from others. So you can have the same video game. I don't know what's a popular one. Mario Brothers. I'm going back old school, but it might be PS2, Xbox One game, and you have to have a way for the patron to differentiate that. You also record it in a 500 note. If there are multiple addition statements in OCLC, you can record them in one mark tag separated by a comma or in separate 250 fields. Next slide, please. Original or copy cataloging in OCLC. You will see single or multiple 250s, and they are acceptable. The shared local practice is to combine multiple addition statements in a single 250 separated by the comma. And the reason for that is that our share pack displays only the first 250 in the brief display. And we want to make sure that patrons can see which game system that game goes to. Next slide, please. So you will see here in our record for OCLC and share local edits, we have Xbox One in the 250 field. Next slide, please. Publication information, that includes place of production, publication, distribution, or manufacturer. The producer, publisher, distributor, or manufacturer in the subfield B. And the source of information can be anywhere on the item. We do use ISBD punctuation with a semicolon before place of publication if there's multiple places. A colon comes before the publisher name and a comma before the date. When you use the 264 field, there's a period at the end of the field. If there's not a date in brackets, then that's when you have the second indicator of 0, 1, 2, or 3. When you have the second indicator of 4, which is the copyright date, there is no ending punctuation. Next slide. You may have multiple 264s for different functions, and that's denoted by the second indicator. 0 is producer, 1 is publisher, 2 is distributor, 3 is manufacturer, and once again, the 4 is copyright date. Next slide, please. When it comes to place of publication, you record it as it is on the item. If needed for clarity, you can add the name of the country or state in brackets if it's not on the item. It's optional. You can record all the places named on the item or just record the first named place. If you do not see a place of publication on the item and you find it elsewhere, say a website or publisher information, enter that in brackets. Or if you cannot find anything, you may enter place of publication not identified. Our share local practice, however, is to supply a place of publication, even if it is just a country. And that would go in square brackets if you find it from an outside source. Next slide. For the publisher, you may use any source on the item or within the item. The preferred source, however, is the same source as the title proper. You transcribe the name of the publisher as it is on the item. And our example here, as you can tell from the spelling, Telltale Games, and that would be how it came on the game. If there's multiple publishers, you can record the first publisher listed on the item and optional to record the others. If you cannot find a publisher, enter a probable name in brackets or the phrase publisher not identified. Next slide, please. For the distributor, if there is no publisher on the item, record the distributor if it's present. If the publisher is present, you do not need to record a distributor. You may use any source on the item or within the item, but it is preferred to come from the same source as the title proper. And you do transcribe it as it appears on the item. Next slide, please. The publication date, use the most recent publication date. And if there is no publication date, record the copyright date as implied dates in brackets. You will find that most video games do not have publication date, and you will have to use that copyright date. If you do not find a copyright date for the video game as a whole, you may use the copyright date for the container and package design. Next slide, please. If there is no date at all available on the item, the cataloger estimates a date, which is the preferred way, or enters the phrase date of publication not identified. So here's some examples of how to enter. If it's the date in the square brackets, it's an inferred or probable date. If it's the date with a question mark in square brackets, it's an uncertain year. And if you think it came out sometime in the 1990s, you put it in square brackets between 1990 and 1999, a probable decade. And our local practice is to record an estimated date in brackets. Next slide, please. So on our video disc label, it's kind of hard to see. So they they blew it up here, copyright and phonogram date of 2017. Next slide. And also in the back, you'll see the copyright date of 2017, along with the publishing information. Next slide. So our video game, the OCLC record and the Polaris record, we have the same information. 264, first indicator of 1, Los Angeles, California. Subfield B, Activision Publishing Incorporated. Subfield C, 2017 in brackets. And the 264 second indicator for with the copyright date of 2017. Next slide, please.
Pam, I don't think that's, Pam asks, in Polaris, why is Los Angeles one word? And I think that's just I don't know why the writing is different for the Polaris record. I think that's just a typo that it's more squished in the Polaris record. I think it would look the same for both of them.
Yeah, she also said the same with Activision Publishing. I think that was just a mistake on that. Okay, I am done with my section and I'm going to hand this over to Anna and she's going to walk you through the rest of the record. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Linda. And if I'm ever going too fast or you have a question or I'm talking too softly, just let me know. I'm very, very interruptible. So, okay. So next we're going to talk about the physical description, the 3XX fields. This includes the extent of the item, the sound characteristics, dimension, and then any accompanying material that you might have, which for a video game could be something like a book that goes with it or an instruction booklet, or it could be some sort of additional material that gives you like special features to the game or something. And you can get this information from anywhere on the item. And then in terms of ISBD punctuation, you're going to want to put a colon before subfield B and then a semicolon before subfield C, which is different from the 264. I always get that mixed up. Sometimes I'll put a comma there instead of a semicolon. And then if you have any accompanying material in subfield E, you're going to have a plus sign. And then you'd have a period at the end, but only if a series statement is present in the 490 field. So in terms of the 3XX fields, you can see there the different types of information that can be coded in these fields. I'm not going to read them all for you, but if you are curious to go more in depth into some of these fields, the CMC just did a great presentation about the 340 field and a couple other fields that talk about the physical characteristics of items. And you can get this information from anywhere on the item. So for the 300 field, the extent of the item, you're going to record the number of physical units and carrier type, etc. So for disks, this would be, 3 computer disks or 1 computer disk. For a cartridge, it's going to say 1 computer chip cartridge. And for video games, likely the video games that we would be cataloging, those are the main 2 types of physical units that you're going to be seeing. And then you also use the 300 field to record other physical characteristics. So you can say in the subfield B, sound and color, or if you have a silent video game, it'd be silent there. And then in the subfield C, you would have the dimensions. So since most video games are going to be discs, it would be 4 3/4 inches, which is the standard size of a computer disk, and that's abbreviated in inches. And then you would just give the details as you would describe the item in an individual record. So this example, subfield A, 2 computer disks, subfield B, colon, subfield B, sound and color, semicolon, subfield C, 4 3/4 inch, which is the standard size. And then if there was a program guide, you'd say plus subfield E, 1 program guide, and then you would have sort of like a mini 300 field for the program guide. So for our video game, we have 1 computer disk, sound, color, 4 3/4 inches, and that's the same in OCLC and Polaris. So then we're going to talk about the other 3XX tags, and these are the linked data tags. So for disk video games, you're going to have a 336 content type of either 2-dimensional moving image with the subfield B, TDI, subfield 2 RDA content, or you can have 3-dimensional moving image. And this is something we've been seeing it different ways in different records. And Jennifer and I were talking about this yesterday, and we were looking at the OLAC guidelines, and that document is in L2 if you want to download it and look at it. And 2-dimensional image is sort of for like the older games, like an older Mario game where everything looks 2-dimensional, and then 3-dimensional moving image, my understanding is for like newer video games where it's intended to look sort of 3D, and that differs from like what it is for movies, because I think if you have a 3D movie, you would need like 3D glasses to be able to see that. So that's the difference there. And then additionally, you can also have the computer program subfield B, COP, subfield 2, RDA content. And then the 337, the media type, you're going to have that there, computer subfield BC, RDA media. And then the carrier type, computer disk, subfield B, CD, subfield 2, RDA carrier. And you can use a macro, it says at the bottom, you can use a macro to generate the 33X fields in OCLC. And the way you would find that when you're in OCLC, you can go to tools and then macros and then manage. And there's a little magic wand icon, or if you have the magic wand icon up at your toolbar, you can use that as well. And it should generate them automatically. So that was for a disk game, which is the example we're doing in this presentation. And after we're done with this presentation, I'm going to show you a Nintendo Switch game. So in case you've never seen that before, we can take a look at it. So for this one, it's the same 336 options. And then 337 is also the same, but then for the 338, the carrier type, instead you're going to have a computer chip cartridge, subfield B, CB, subfield 2, RDA carrier. So that's the main difference there, is the cartridge versus the disk. Then for 340, information about the physical medium, you can use these fields to get more granular about what the video game is. So for disk games, you can have a 340 subfield B with the dimensions, 4 3/4 inches, and then subfield G for the color content, and this one's color. And then for cartridge games, you have 340 subfield B, 1 1/4 inch, and that is the standard size of Nintendo Switch games. So probably between those two, you can cover most of the games you'll be cataloging, unless you know, if for some reason you're cataloging one of the older like N64 games and those cartridges are much bigger. But these are for current games, those are probably the standard sizes for most of the things you'll be seeing. And then sound characteristics in the 344. So you'll use that to record if it's sound or silent. I imagine most video games would have some sort of sound. I mean, maybe not, but that would be my guess for that. And then for discs, you can also have the subfield A digital, subfield 2 RDA TR, and that's the RDA tag for that. And then subfield B optical, subfield 2 RDA RM. And then more 3XX tags, 346. If this is more depending on what's on your item. So if your item has this information, a lot of the discs like function as Blu-ray like they are Blu-ray discs. And like an Xbox One will function as a Blu-ray disc player. So it might have this information on there. So the 346 there, the 347, you can record the file type, the encoding format, file size, regional encoding, etc.
Anna, can we go back a slide, please?
Yes, we can. Something.
Or
let's
is it
see.
2? Talking about the 340, sorry. So
color.
as Pam Thomas pointed out that we forgot about, 340 subfield G color is share local practice. The RDA
Gotcha.
practice is 340 subfield G polychrome subfield 2 RDACC.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. Yes, I think it's polychrome and monochrome are the two
Mhm.
main ones for RDA that you would use that subfield 2 RDACC if you're editing if you're doing an original record in OCLC, if you're editing one of the OCLC records. Thank you for pointing that out. Was that all? Do I need to go back anymore?
Nope, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, did I do this one already? This is more examples of 347. No, you're fine. You're fine, Pam. This is more examples of the 347 tags that you might have. You won't necessarily have all of these in every record. It just depends on what it says on your item. So for our video game, we have a 2-dimensional moving image, subfield B, TDI, subfield 2, RDA content, and then computer program, computer, and then computer disk for the 338, because it's a disk rather than a cartridge. And then for our video game, additional tags, again, for this 340 subfield G, you'd want to have, for the OCLC record, you'd want to have polychrome rather than color with the subfield 2 RDACC. And you have the dimensions in the first 340 fields. And then you have the digital and optical fields because it's a disc. And then it has, so our game has the Dolby Digital information for the type of sound, and then the program file and the video file and the Blu-ray tags. Because it has Blu-ray, it's a Blu-ray disc. Go on to the next one. So feel free, if you have any questions about those, I can go back again. But we will move on now to the series information, which is in the 490 and 8XX fields. Oh, goodness. So this is if you have a series statement on the item, and preferably you would get that information from the item itself or with somewhere within the item. But you can take it from an outside source. So if you're cataloging something and you think, I'm pretty sure this is part of a series, you can look that up, and then you would want to make sure to put a semicolon before the series numbering if you have, if it's like, I don't even know, Grand Theft Auto 16 or whatever they're on, semicolon, subfield B, 16, either if that's on the item, you'd put 16, or you can put it in brackets if you got it from outside of the source. And then for the 490 tag, you want to record it as it appears on the resource. And then you'd follow it up later with the 8XX tag as it's established in a series authority record. So it may or may not be the same as the 490. In the example we have at the bottom, it is the same, and that's just because, for that example, it would have been established as a series title the same way it's written on the item, but it might not be. So for 830 is a series established under a specific title. And then for 800 is series established under the author's name. Probably for video games, it would be more likely to have the 830 because, as Linda was saying earlier, it's unlikely that you're going to have one specific person who's responsible for a video game, since they're like, you know, movies, they're so collaborative. Okay, and then moving on to the notes fields. This is any additional information that you have about the resource, and you can take notes information from the item itself, or you can take it from outside sources. So you're going to use different indicators, different 500. We'll talk about the different types of notes that you can have, but you can always look in OCLC bib formats if you want more specific information on the indicators. And then a lot of the notes do have ending punctuation, with the exception of a couple, and we'll talk about those. So a 500 is for general notes, and in a 500 note, you'll definitely want to include like number of players, any information about special features. If the video game is based on a book or another video game or a movie, you'd want to include that. And any quoted notes, you might see some quoted notes like if you go to the authority record for a series and it says, don't record this as a series, record this as a quoted note, you'd see that in a 500 note. And then the 505 note is for contents. So you could use this to record the title of different segments of the video game. And, you know, or if there's part 1 and part 2, you could do that there. And then 508 is creation production credits notes. So if they list a designer, if they list voice actors or graphic artists, you can list them there. The 520 is for a summary, which is just a brief description of the contents of the work. A lot of times you can take some information from the back of the container for the summary. And if you need to do like a content advice note, you can do a first indicator of 4 if you want to make sure people know that there's, you know, excessive blood or profanity or something in the video game. And then 521 is for the target audience. And that's usually for video games, they'll have some sort of rating, either E or T for teen or M for mature. Then 538 is system requirements. And this is just information on required playback equipment. So if you need a specific amount of hard drive space, or you need a place, you know, you can only use a PlayStation 3, you can't use other game consoles for it. Any of the information you see listed there is fair game for the 538 field. And then you'll also want to have a 588 source of description note. We want to have those for all non-book items. So you'll have a source of title note, and that's 588 first indicator 0. Title from, you know, it'll just say title from disc label or title from title screen, wherever the title is from. So on our video game, on the container, you can see the number of players, the audience, and the system requirements. All that information is listed on the back of the video game. So example notes for our video game: requires internet from the container, developed by Bungie. Bungie's a pretty common one that you might see. Xbox One, 1 player, Xbox Live, 2 to 9 players. That's also a pretty common distinction that you might see for video games, because some of them need that, like you have to have an account with Nintendo or Xbox or whatever in order to, you know, play with multiple people or connect to your friends. So you'll want to list that if it tells you what it is for that item that you're looking at, because, you know, the patron looking it up might want to be able to play with their friends in another state, or maybe they only want a 1-player game. So that's important information to list. And then a nice little summary there, something about Gaul, the imposing commander of the brutal Red Legion. Sounds very scary. I don't play video games like this, but to each his own. And then our video game, and for the rating, it's rated T for teen, and then they have a little parenthetical note there for animated blood and violence. So anything you think people might want to know before, checking out a game. And then the system requirements, Xbox One, you need 68 gigabytes in order to save, multiplayer, etc. Oh, the multiplayer you'd probably want to put in a 500 mode actually. And then the 588 for subfield or first indicator 0. Ugh, I always mix up indicator and subfield. First indicator 0, title from title screen. So then we will move on to subject headings. So you want to add them as applicable. And if you're editing a record, you want to just make sure the ones that are there make sense for the item that you're looking at. The topical ones that are the general subject or subjects of the work. Geographic, so if it was like Call of Duty Europe or something, you would want to add a geographic tag for that. Names, if there's a pure, I don't know, like playing as Edgar Allan Poe, writing poetry or something, that sounds more like my type of game. Then you would want to have a tag for that. And then if you have, you'd want to have the free floating subdivision subfield V computer games for any of the topical subject headings that you have. You want to add that to it. So here are some genre subject headings. So the 655s, and you want to always add from the OLAC video game thesaurus, the video games with that subfield 2 there. There's no like good way to say that, honestly. Or if it's a computer game rather than like a video game, there's that computer games subfield 2 local. And that's I think that's a share local thing as well. I don't think you would want to add the local to the OCLC record, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then this is for if you are cataloging a computer game, like rather than an Xbox game or something, you can add these subject headings for the computer games. And then there's also add as applicable for type of video game. So if it's an Xbox video game, and I'm going to show you after the presentation, I'm going to show you the share page that we have about video games. And that's where a lot of these come from. And they have, so if they have the subfield 2, if they're giving where, like what thesaurus it is, it'll have the second indicator 7. And if it's a Library of Congress subject heading that we're using as a genre heading, then you'll have the second indicator 0. So for our video game, we have 650, second indicator 0, subfield A, like shooting or combat, and then you have that free floating subdivision, subfield B, computer games. And then we have 655, second indicator 7, action and adventure video games from the OLAC video games thesaurus. And then we have the second indicator 0, Xbox video games. And then 655, second indicator 7, video games from the OLAC video game thesaurus. You'll also want to include any standard numbers that are on your item. So if there's an ISBN, a UPC number, publisher numbers, or any appropriate call numbers. And for the call numbers, you just want to be consistent. A lot of libraries alphabetize video games by title. If you want to use the Dewey number, you can have, I think in past versions of Dewey, it's been a different number, but currently 794.8 is just like the general number for electronic games. So if you just want a general electronic game number, you can use that one. So on our container, we have a UPC number there. So it would be listed as 024, first indicator 1. That means it's a UPC number, and then it lists the UPC number. And then we have a 092 for the Dewey number, and it's 794.8. Additionally, you'll want to have a 007 field. You're going to want to have this for all non-print formats. And then this is part of what Polaris uses to generate that format icon in the pack. For the 007, there is a macro in OCLC if you want to use that, or you can put it in manually. For video games, in subfield A, C is for computer files. And then in the subfield B, you'll probably have O for optical discs, or you'd have B for chip cartridge, depending on what game you're cataloging. And then depending on what the color content is, you would choose one of those. Then you would have subfield E, the dimensions of a disk. Yeah, dimensions for a disk is subfield G. Sorry, that was confusing, is G. Or Z is for a chip cartridge. I think Z is like unknown or something. I don't think they have the standard dimensions in there for the chip cartridge. And then A, subfield F, A is for sound, but there's also one for silent. So you just choose whatever's appropriate there. And then the rest of them, I've seen them multiple different ways. Sometimes they're cataloged as U for unknown for the rest of these. They're not really relevant to video games. So I've also seen them just like with the lines that mean they weren't, no one tried to catalog, no one tried to code those specific spots. And then the fixed fields will always be present in the record, but may or may not contain data, sort of like the 007. And it will only accept data that is valid for that field. So if you try to put in something crazy, it won't let you. And different formats will have different fixed fields. And this is what people can use to limit searches, and also what helps to generate the format icon in the pack. So for our video game, did I skip a slide? Yes, okay. I was like, wait a minute. Sorry, try not to make you dizzy by moving too quickly. Okay. So for type of record, you'd have M for computer files. And then the form of item is Q for direct electronic. And then file, type of computer file is G for game. And then the date, you'll either have the S for a single date if there is a publication date on there, or more likely you'll have the T for a publication date and copyright/phonogram date. So for our video game, we have the M, it's just the monographic record, so M, ISBD punctuation, direct electronic, game, and then source is D because we are not the Library of Congress. Language is ENG because it's in English. Country is CAU because it was published in California. And then we have the T with the two 2017s for the implied publication date and the copyright date. Okay. And then the authorized access points. As Linda mentioned earlier, video games aren't usually going to have a 1xx field just because there isn't usually that one person who's responsible for the whole video game. It's more likely that you'll have, the production company or the publisher, people who voiced specific characters in the 7xx fields as contributors. For every 1xx and 7xx field you have, you'll want to include a relationship designator. In OCLC, you could see a subfield 4 with a 3-letter relator code, or you could see it with subfield E with a relationship designator. Both of those are correct, but for our share local practice, if you see the subfield 4 with a 3-letter code, you're going to want to switch it to a subfield E with the full relationship designator. And you can get those from the RDA toolkit, or there's a longer, Library of Congress has a longer list of the relator codes on their website. I see Bonnie's question. Would I include an audience code for the mature or teen games? Yeah, I think you could include the 521. You can include the rating. And then if it has like an additional statement, like, you know, viewer discretion is advised or something, I would also put that on there in a 500 note. Does that answer your question? Oh, not in the fixed field. Oh, I see what you're, yeah, sorry, I misunderstood your question. Yeah, in the fixed fields, let me go back. So in the audience note, I didn't mention the audience note. Yeah, if you did have a game that was intended for kids, you could put the J in there, or whatever I can never remember off the top of my head what the code is for teens specifically. You could put that in there. And then if it really is like, you know, something that has a lot of like explicit content, you could put oh, Mary says it's D. Yeah, D is specifically like for teenagers. And then if you did have a game, generally I think our practice is that if you have a game that's just a general like adult game, you don't necessarily code that as like an adult material, but if you had a game that has a lot of like really explicit content, you could code that as E, I think, for adults. And that would sort of give the user some more information that this isn't for small children, at least. Did that answer your question? Perfect. Okay. Okay. So for our video game, 710 First Indicator 2, Bungie Firm is the way it's written in the authority files, and that is the production company. And then Activision is the publisher. So we have the full subfield E relator terms there. So we have fixed fields again, which we talked about. And then this is just some screenshots from this video game we've sort of been looking at as we go through the presentation. You can see the 007 there. It has the other fields, or the other subfields coded as a U for unknown. Then in the 040, we have the subfield B, ENG for English, and the subfield, and English is the language of the cataloging agency rather than the language of the material. And then subfield E, RDA, since we're doing it in RDA. We have 028, different publisher numbers, and it has the subfield Q for where that number was taken from, so the disk label and the container. And we have the UPC, the 024 First Indicator 1 is the UPC number, and the Library of Congress call number. We'll move on to the next screenshot. And we have the Dewey number, the 092, or you could do it 082, and then you would have first indicator 0, second indicator 4, since we are not the Library of Congress. And then you would have the same number, but then you would have that subfield 2. And then if you got that information from like WebDewey, you would have I'll show you later. It's hard to describe. I'm realizing this is a hard thing to describe. I will talk about that in our example that we do. And then the 245, since there's no 100 fields, there's first indicator 0, second indicator 0, because there's no articles at the beginning of the name. So it's Destiny 2, Activision. And then 246, first indicator 3, and they spelled out 2. It's an Xbox One game. There's the 250 statement with the type of console that you'd need, what type of video game it is. Trying to think if there's anything else I should point out in particular on here. Looks pretty good. And then we're also going to, this is for a disk, and then we're going to go through we're going to edit one of our records for a Nintendo Switch game. Some more information. They have also here, you can see the 380 field. I don't think I talked about that earlier. And that's, I think it's like form of work. And I think for DVDs, you'd either have like motion picture or television program. So you can just have video, the most general term, so video games. And then this, I made a note here that this should be a 588 first indicator 0. So I even did my correction wrong. That's confusing. Sorry about that. Let's see. And then there's 500 note Xbox Live 2 to 9 players. A quote from the container that requires internet, and a quote about the game from the container, and the summary in the 520. Let's see what else. And then we have the subject headings here. You have what the game is about right here, and with the subfield B, computer games. And then we have the genre headings from the OLAC video game thesaurus, and then our 700 notes. And I think, let me see. Then we have a very old screenshot of Polaris. Should have taken that out probably. I'll show you in Polaris what it actually looks like now. Okay. And then these are the resources that we talked about or that we used in creating this presentation. I'm also, sorry, I'm just gonna go back for a second. There's also another 700 field that talks about like what type of console you're using, and I'll show you that in Polaris as well. We will talk about that briefly. Okay, going to end the slideshow there. And then first, sorry. Okay, so first we're going to look at, so this is on the Share website. If you go to cataloging, policies and procedures, video games and computer games, we have a list of information about cataloging video games and computer games. Talks about the GMD, talks about the edition statement. And it says here, it said this is a local edit only. I've seen this a lot in the WorldCat records too, so I wouldn't be surprised if you also end up seeing that in WorldCat records. Physical description and 538 for system requirements. Number of players, the rating. And then this is what I was talking earlier about the subject headings. So we have the subfield V, computer games. You want to add that to video games. And then we have form and genre headings. So for video games, it gives you, examples of what you would want to add. And if you need the list of terms from the OLAC website, if you click that link there, it will give you the PDF, and the PDF looks like this. So it gives you a list of OLAC video game genre vocabulary that you can use. And you can just add whatever seems appropriate for your game. I don't really know what casual video games means, to be honest, but maybe you have a casual video game that you need to catalog. Let's see. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. And then it does make, on our website, it does make the distinction between video games and computer games, which I think can be potentially a little confusing if you're not super familiar with video games. Like, so video games, I'm assuming means, like what we looked at today, like an Xbox One game. And computer games would need, you'd need like a PC, like a desktop computer or a laptop to play it. And there's sort of that distinction made there. And then computer and video games, you can add any of these that are relevant to your games. So if you need a list, they're on our website. And then it also talks about Play Away Launchpads, which have games on them. Okay. Let me see. Okay. So hopefully everyone's doing okay. I'm just gonna keep chugging along. So now we're gonna look at a Nintendo Switch game.
Anna, before you
Yes.
move on, Susan was saying that Rock Band, Karaoke Revolution, video games based on board games. Were you saying, Susan, those were being classified as computer games? You can unmute yourself, or if you want to type in the chat, Susan.
I was giving examples of casual games. I
Oh,
play
casual.
a-
Oh,
Okay.
casual games.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you. That's a good.
They're
Okay, that
not,
makes
they're not
sense.
I mean, the shooter competition games can be cooperative or competition. Yes, I'm a big gamer. But casual games is referring more to games that you play that they're not, it's not serious. I shouldn't say Rock Band can't get serious, it can, but anyway, it's more like casual games that you're playing cooperatively together.
I see. So it's like party games, sort of like you're not
Yeah,
there
like
to.
Phoenix is a casual.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. See,
I have a game
you learn
that
something new every day.
I have a game that's actually beat the intro, and it's kind of a DVD game where it plays the intro, and you're basically team playing that. So
Okay.
Well, thank you for that clarification, Susan. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So and you can get this document as well in L2. It should be up there if you want to take a closer look at this game. So I chose Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, a Nintendo Switch game, mostly because I have this at home and I was able to take pictures of it. And it offered a good opportunity to make some edits to one of our Polaris records. But I will go through, in case you don't have it pulled up, I will quickly show that. So that's the front of the container. And that's the back. And then I have a couple close-ups in here of the different information on the game. That's the other side. And then when you open it up, that's the cartridge itself inside. So if we were assuming we had this game in our hand and we were going to search for it, we would go to Polaris, and we could search for it by typing in Breath of the Wild into the title. Okay, so it gives us 4 options, and 2 of them are books, and then 2 of them are electronic resources. So I'm going to look at the first electronic resource. And make it a little larger. So this one is not the one. So we're looking at a Nintendo Switch game. So this is not the one that we want. It's Wii U, and it's a disc. So that is not the right one. So I'm going to look at the other one. So this one, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Nintendo Switch, 2017. So this is the right one. You'd want to do the matching process for this. I'm not going to go through all that because I know this is the right one because I looked it up ahead of time. So we're going to go through and look at this one and see how it compares to our presentation that we just made. Okay. So we have our leader fields, and you can see, can everyone see this okay? It might be kind of small. So we have computer file as M, and it's kind of nice in Polaris. It tells you what all of the different ones mean, and you don't have to look them up necessarily if you remember them. So, and then I is for ISBD punctuation included. So that all looks good, I think. Okay. And then this is the 007 that we talked about. So we have C for electronic resource, B for chip cartridge, multicolored, dimensions or other because it's that Nintendo Switch cartridge, and sound. And then it says, this is what I was talking about earlier with a no attempt to code. So some of them you'll see it will say unknown. Does anyone like, is it better to do one or the other for these, or is it okay to leave it like that? I'm assuming we can leave it like that. Let's see. Okay, so 020 is the ISBN, and then in the subfield C, they have the price. And with the price, you only have to include that if the price is listed on the item. So if you're doing original cataloging, you don't have to include the price unless it's listed on the item. And then we have 024, first indicator 1, and that is the UPC number. And then we have a couple of publisher numbers here. And you can see the subfield Q, container, because that's where it was from. And then in terms of edits, one of the things I'm going to change, this says disk cartridge. I'm going to change that to say chip cartridge. You can see, let me show you again in Word in my little thing here. So it's got chip cartridge, there's that publisher number. And then we have some more numbers here. And there's the UPC number. Okay. So scrolling down, we have the 040. So it has the subfield E. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Pam just posted something about the 020, the subfield C. So if you want to look at that, you can check that out. Adding price info was old practice, probably AACR2. Okay. So yeah, so that was incorrect. So if you are cataloging something, you shouldn't add the price information. That's old. I generally haven't been, but I don't know. Do you think I should we take it out of this record? If it's in there, like, is it wrong to keep it in there? I would remove it. Okay. So we're going to remove that as well. Perfect. Okay, so the 040, we have the subfield E RDA, and we're going to add the subfield B. Katie says, since patrons could potentially see it, I think it's usually a good idea to remove prices. Okay. Well, that makes sense then. Oops. Can't spell. Okay, so I added the subfield B, ENG for English, which is the language of the cataloging agency. Then we have a 041, first indicator 1, which means there's a translation. We didn't talk about this field specifically in the presentation because it's the same as any other kind of item that you would catalog. But if we look at our item, it says content in French and Spanish. And so presumably from looking at this, it has content in French and Spanish. So you can choose those language options and they would be translated into those languages. Let's see what else. So for the 082, that's the Dewey number. First indicator 0, second indicator 4. We have 794.8, so that's the Dewey number for electronic games. We have subfield 223, and that means it's from the 23rd edition of Dewey. So if we, if this were an old number, we weren't sure, we could go to, this is what I usually do, is go to Web Dewey. And we can search 794.8. And it comes up, you can see it there, electronic games under indoor games of skill. So that's correct. And this is, and somebody can also, this is the wrong thing. This is what I've been doing. So somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but you would add the ENG for English, and then you would add the date. And that just means that we looked in WebDewey on this day and verified that this is the correct Dewey number. Then we have the 245, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. We have our GMD for electronic resource. And then we have 246.30, and the second indicator 0 means that it's part of the larger title with Breath of the Wild. We have Nintendo Switch for the edition statement, because that's what it is. And then we have, I'll go back to the item. Let's see if you can see it. So I don't see anything on here that says Redmond, Washington. And that means that information came from an outside source, in which case I think we want to put this in brackets. And when you put something in brackets, if it's not from the source, you want to spell it out. Nintendo of America, 2017. Then we have one computer chip cartridge, sound and color, 1 1/4 inch, and that is the size of the Nintendo Switch games. Let me see. I had a little list of things I wanted to change, make sure that we're hitting all of them. And if anyone sees anything that you think we should edit, feel free to put it in the chat or let me know. Okay, moving down. So this was the thing that Jennifer and I talked about earlier, and I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the 3-dimensional moving image versus the 2-dimensional moving image. We don't need both of these unless, I mean, I guess you could have both of them if the game had like portions of it that were in that 2-dimensional format and then other portions that were in the 3-dimensional format. For this game, I think I'm just going to choose 3-dimensional moving image, and I'm going to get rid of this other one. All right, and then we have computer program, computer and computer chip cartridge, and that's all correct. Okay, so then we have the other 3XX fields. So for this one, we're going to split this part out, and this optical would be for if this were a disk, and it's not a disk, it's a cartridge. So we're going to change that. And I don't think we need this tag here either. I think for the subfield B, we just have the dimensions. Okay, subfield. Let's see. So for the disk, it's going to be for the chip, I'm sorry, it's going to be subfield B, other. Okay. And then we want to add 340 subfield, oops, G, polychrome, subfield 2. Okay. And let's see. Let's look back at our item. Dum-de-dum. Don't see any. Oh, that's true, Pam. We can change this to color. Since that's the share way. Okay. I don't see any like specific sound information. It doesn't say like Dolby Digital or anything, so we don't have to add any of that stuff. Okay, I think this is good. Let's see. Okay. So then we have in this 500 note, we have TV mode, 1 player. So it shows it there, TV mode, 1 player. And that's the thing about the Nintendo Switch is it has like the 2 different options that you can play with, and it might be that in different modes, different numbers of players are, able to join in. So TV mode, 1 player, tabletop mode, 1 player, handheld mode. I'm gonna also add the word player there, so it's consistent. And then we have a quote from the container. Basic reading ability is needed to fully enjoy this game. And that's over here. It's got the little ABC note, basic reading ability is needed to fully enjoy this game. So you'd want to have that in there to make sure that people know that, if you're a very small person who cannot read yet, this might not be the most fun game for you. Let's see, what else? So it also has the 500 note amiibo. Use compatible amiibo figures for helpful boosts on your adventure. And that's right there. So we have another note for that. I would also, so right here, you can see in the red, it says warning. If you have epilepsy or have had seizures or other unusual reactions to flashing lights or patterns, consult a doctor before playing video games. So since that's on there, I probably would also add a note. And I'm gonna, quoted notes should have quotations, double container, no quotes, no spaces, double dash, no spaces, source. Let's see. Okay. Get rid of the spaces. I usually capitalize the word container, but I'm not sure if that's required. Anyway, I won't make you watch me type out this whole note, but that is a note that I would add. And then we have the 520, and that talks a little bit about the game, explore the wilds of Hyrule. So whatever you think is appropriate there, you can add for the 520, the summary note. Then we have 521, first indicator 8, the rating information.
Anna,
And oh,
the
yes.
500 container should be capitalized. That's standard practice.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. So I'm just gonna write epilepsy note there, so you know what that's supposed to be. And I will change that before I save it. Where was I? Okay, we were on the 521, the audience information. This looks good, except I'm going to change this typo And that's usually, I mean, when I'm going through a record, I usually do read through, you know, you're supposed to check it and make sure everything, even if you're like, oh, this looks good, like definitely like read through it, make sure, because you might, even if everything is correct, you might catch some typos. So it's always good to read through everything and not just assume that it's what it's supposed to be. 538 system requirements. It's got Amiibo compatible, Nintendo Switch Pro controller compatible. So that's all good information to include.
The 588 has a
Someone
typo as well.
says oh, yes. So cartridge label, title from cartridge label. Perfect. Game content in English, French, and Spanish, and that's why we had that 041. Okay, now moving on to the 650s. So we have Legend of Zelda game. So there must be an authority record with Legend of Zelda game. Or we can check. Let's see. So Legend of Zelda. Yes. So we do have the authority record for Legend of Zelda game. Perfect. Then we have End of the World computer games. So we have that computer games, free-floating subdivision V computer games for all of the 650s, quests, imaginary places, good and evil. That all makes sense for a Zelda game. And then we have the 655 second indicator 0. It is my understanding from looking at our share guidelines that these would be specifically for computer games, and that for a video game like Legend of Zelda on the Switch, we would prefer terms from the OLAC vocabulary. So I'm going to look on there. And I'm just going to choose like equivalent ones. So adventure games and fantasy games. So we have action adventure video games. So adventure video games. So, oops. Adventure video games. And then, since that is from the OLAC vocabulary, we would do like that. And then fantasy games, fantasy video games. Subfield 2. And then if we go back to our share website, this is for computer and video games. We have these. So 655, second indicator 0, Xbox video games. So Xbox video games, Nintendo video games. So yep, we have for Xbox, and so that would be correct. And then this video games for the genre says for all video games, add the following form heading to all video games for all records for video games. So we want to add subfield 2. Okay. And then we can see the 710, Nintendo of America. And just for kicks, we can look them up in the authority files. So we have Nintendo of America Incorporated. So that is correct. And we have the full relationship designator for publisher and software developer. And then this is the other field. Hopefully you can, hopefully you can see it there. The 753 that I guess we forgot to add to the PowerPoint. That is the field. Let me pull it up in BIP standards actually, so you can see it. That talks about the console that you'd need, system details, access to computer files. So let me see. Where it goes, yes. So this is, you know, if you're choosing a term from a controlled list, you could do the subfield too, but or you can just have, you know, whatever the game system is, that's a good place, that's a good field to use for recording like Xbox One or Nintendo Switch or Game Boy Advance or whatever it is that you're cataloging for. And I see Bonnie has a question. Should you change the second indicator for the 655 general video game from blank to 7? Yes, we should. Good catch. So yeah, you want the second indicator 7 because now we have the subfield 2 saying what thesaurus it's from. Okay. So I'm looking at everything. Sorry, that's probably hard for you to see. Okay, so I think other than my little epilepsy note that I'm gonna add that this looks pretty good. So we have successfully updated this record. Is there anything that anyone noticed or has a question about or wants to add to this, or anything that I said that is questionable? Please let me know. We're all working on it together, so I'll wait a couple of seconds to see if anybody has a question. Okay, well, that's pretty much it. What is Amiibo? You know, I don't totally know. Let me see if I have so it says use compatible Amiibo figures for helpful boosts on your adventure, and they're sold separately. So it's some little, like, it looks like there's like a little dude here. So I think you can purchase these Amiibo guys separately. And I guess they help you with your game. I don't have any personally, but let's see. It's a figure item that can give in-game items. Okay, so it allows you to unlock specific features within the game if you have those. Yeah, it is kind of funny. But I mean, maybe I don't know how they work. I don't know if it's like each individual person would have to buy them, or if like the library could buy them and then people could check them out. Maybe we will be cataloging Amiibos in the future, but probably not if it's a thing that like you can only use once or something. Set them on the controller to pop them into the game. Oh, that's kind of cool. Sounds kind of fun. 500 note for that if people have their own figurines. Yeah, that's true. You could, if you like knew about the Amiibos. So we have the 500 note. Let's see. That you can use compatible Amiibo figures for helpful boosts on your adventure. So yeah, you could add an additional 500 note, like if you knew that it's like, you know, if you have these Amiibos, you'd have to use your own, or, you know, you could add some note that would help people understand what that is or how to use the game. Veronica says if it's like Webkins, they're probably only used once used. Yeah. Oh, so Katie says there's a code once it's been paired. That makes sense.
But Bobby indicated that they can be used again.
Oh.
Yeah. For people who know about these, do they still make them, or are they like the Lego Adventure game where they stopped making them because they kind of just fell out of popularity? Good to know. Okay.
Well, thank you to, Adam says, let's see. Set the item on the controller and it would drop an in-game treasure chest or food that can be used multiple times, but usually once per day. Ah, I see. Just bought 3 more myself. That's good.
Good to know.
So yeah, thank you to Pam and to everyone who added stuff. It's always exciting to learn more.
Okay. Thank you, Anna and Linda and Sue, for putting that together. That was really helpful. Sorry, I'm trying not to sneeze. Josh, would you be willing to go ahead and do cool things we've cataloged, and then we'll put questions after that at the end?
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and take over the screen here so I can show pictures. Got a lot of stuff open on here. My apologies. The thing that I worked on, this was actually in July, but we haven't had a live session in a little while, so I wanted to share this. It's something called a Tony box and a Tony figurine. So let me pull up a picture here as well. The Tony box is a little, it's like a personal stereo for kids. It's meant for kids. And this is the box of that the item came in. And you'll see that little figurine sitting on top. The premise of this is that each of these figurines has some sort of audio already coded on it, whether it's some of them are music, some of them are stories. And the kid just takes this little figurine. I'm making motions with my hands that none of you can see. The kid just takes this figurine and puts it on top of the box, and then it plays whatever is on the figurine, music or the book. And this is kind of neat. The box itself is coded, like the stereo device itself is mostly just coded as a piece of equipment. I've got the record here for it. It's got all the sort of notes we would put in, like a tablet or something to include, that includes a charging station and adapter. It's got all our 33X fields powered by a battery, etc. But then the cool one for me was actually the note for the figurine. Little guy, there's one of them that comes individually bundled, or individually sold. Excuse me. And this particular one too was actually modifiable on the app, I guess, that comes with it. You could put your own music or stories on it. So here's the record for that. And we've got, all of our 33X fields, both for the physical item, the tactile 3-dimensional form, and then for the content of it, that it's digital, non-volatile flash memory. And this was just a neat little thing that I had never seen before or even heard of. But Carlinville bought it and then also didn't really have any idea what to do with it. So they sent it up to us. And it seems like a neat thing for public libraries, especially to be able to loan out to kids just with the little stories and songs on them.
Thank you, Josh. And I can attest we have one at home and our son loves it. So they're great for little kids. They're very hard to break. So does anyone have any questions about anything we covered, cataloging in general? The floor is open. And you're more than welcome to unmute yourself or type in the chat box. Oh, the record for Gwen asked, why did that record have 035 and 945? For the Tony box or the Tony figurine? The box. Josh, do you mind pulling that record back up?
Yes, let me
Thanks.
get that pulled back up here real quick. Oh, it was on the figurine. So the reason is actually that this particular one already had an OCLC record. I had to make original records for some of the ones that had stories, and I must have just put that OCLC do not set on this one erroneously. I had to make original records for the story ones, but this one did have an OCLC record. So I will actually remove that now. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? All right. If not, thank you for attending. Everyone will get 2 hours of CE credit, even though we did not go the full 2 hours. And our next meeting will be on Tuesday, October 11th at our normal time. Our recording of this, as well as the transcripts of the chat, should be put up by the end of the week. If you have any questions, feel free to email any of the share cataloging staff, or if you have any CMC questions, feel free to email them. Have a wonderful day.